All right, welcome back to the Four Elements Press LGBTQ Author Series, where we talk to LGBTQ authors about their works, about how they became authors, their messages for the LGBTQ community. And my name is Alexander Casillas. I'm the host today. Today we have Mark Salzwedel. He is a multi-published author and editor, and I'll let him introduce himself. How are you, Mark?
I'm okay, Alexander. Thank you. I've written two books. The Lever was science fiction, gay science fiction, published in 2022. And my most recent novel was published in 2024, last year. It was called The Miraculous Life of Rupert Rocket. And it's sort of magical realism. And that's also got a gay main character and a gay theme to it. I've also written about 8 short stories. I've had 2 poems published, and I'm working on some screenplays and operas.
That's an incredible repertoire of work. Um, to write in so many genres is pretty daunting for a lot of writers. Were you always interested in writing in all those formats, or did you kind of challenge yourself at different parts of your career?
Well, that's a good question. I think I had started very early with music. I joined a choir when I was 7. And so like 45 years later, I'm still interested in music um, and um, I guess I had started songwriting probably in my teens, and I got more serious about it in the last 20 years or so. Um, and so I had seen a lot of operas. I had grown up as an actor as well, doing a lot of musical theater. So it's not much of a jump from musical theater to opera. Um, and I watched lots of movies. I lived in LA for 8 years. I've watched lots of new small productions and large productions, and got a sense of what that involved. So I had the vocabulary and the sense of style and format for several different types of genres. And I think it's nice to have an ability to go from one type of thing to another. If I'm not getting very far on my novel, I can work on my screenplay, or if that's not working either, I can uh, do some composing or something like that. So it gives me more things to do. I don't do them all at once, just go back and forth between them. So it's manageable.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then so with your because you have had a career as an editor as well. How has that kind of tied into your like author career and your writing?
Well, I started out, my first job out of college was working for a publishing house in the Twin Cities, and eventually they got acquired by Harper and Row at the time, now HarperCollins. And I moved to San Francisco to work in HarperCollins's San Francisco office as an acquiring editor, mostly for nonfiction books. My categories were uh, religion, philosophy, and psychology. Um, and I worked there for about 6 years, and then I started doing a lot of freelance work. I worked for some literary journals and did some journalism. And eventually I started working for a textbook publisher here in New York, and then started working in advertising for a while.
Okay. So you've used writing in many different ways.
And editing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with the magazines too, you were in the editing side.
hmm
Did you ever have any interest in getting into like the writing side of the corporate world?
The corporate world, yeah, worked for corporate publicity. I did corrected people's corporate resumes for a while, edited them, uh, and certainly the advertising work was all corporate writing as well.
Yeah. A lot of our up and coming writers who are, going to school, who have those ambitions to pursue art and writing as a career, sometimes can be dissuaded in a lot of different ways going through education just because of, we live in a very in a tough society where we need to make money to pay bills. So it's great to see that you've kind of navigated different different positions within different companies to kind of, you know, pay the bills. And then we're with your novel writing too, did you start, how was that process? Did you start with an idea and kind of pitch the idea to publishers? Did you if you could speak a little bit about that.
hmm Yeah, how I got started in writing fiction.
Yeah.
I guess I started out, uh, wrote my first story when I was 10. It was not very ambitious. I was using my mom's manual, big metal Smith Corona typewriter, and it was a
Um,
short story with a sort of a gothic horror idea to it. Um,
that's fun.
yeah. I don't remember much of the plot except that it involved a hole in the wall that looked like an old radio. So,
Mm.
um, other than that, I guess mostly got serious about it after working as an editor for so long and feeling like I was just making other people's writing better.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about what I could do to do my own writing. I switched in advertising from being a medical editor to being a copy supervisor. So I was doing more research and writing at that point. I had already been doing some content work, doing health and medical content work online for various websites. And I came to New York and wanted to get more serious about trying the writing side. And I joined a speculative fiction group in Brooklyn and met a lot of other writers there. We had critique sessions and bring in short stories and chapters of novels and things like that to have them critiqued. And I think that's one of the most valuable things for a writer starting out is to try to find, if not a critique partner, at least try to get into a situation with a group where you can get lots of different perspectives on your writing and get a sense of what you're doing well and what you're not doing as well and you need to work on, or you can get models of other people's writing where they're doing something well and adopt it to yourself. So that's a really important step too. Got my first short story published in 2017 um, in a professional magazine, and I've been doing it pretty steadily. I've had 8 published so far in the past few years. My first novel was actually was actually my 6th novel written. One of the things I tell people quite often is that writing is an apprenticeship. So you really have to read a lot and you have to write a lot. Most published authors can track their um, experience in writing. That the first publication came after at least a half million, if not a full million words had been written elsewhere. So I was about 600,000 words between the various novels I'd written before I had one that sold. And it was kind of an interesting case of I sent it to a press. Actually, I sent an earlier version to a press of a space opera, and they said, the gay characters are just sort of side characters. We need to have the main character be gay, and otherwise we can't really take it because it was a gay press. And so I said, well, I've got this short story that I think I could expand into a novel where all the characters are gay.
Yeah.
And so gay or lesbian. And they said, go ahead and write it. And I said, I'll try to have it to you by December. So it's like 6 months. I wrote the novel that eventually became The Lever. And they took a look at it, and it was exactly what I had promised them. But the publisher looked at it instead of the editor, and the publisher said, no, we can't publish this because there was a plot device where the army was hacking genetic clinics to get more recruits to turn them into submissive gays that would fill their gay and lesbian platoons. Um, they didn't like the idea that they thought their readers would object to hearing that. sexuality was that malleable. And so I eventually got an agent who really liked the project as well, and he's tried to sell it around to the big houses, and none of them bit. So eventually, after 2 years, I let him go, and I went to a Twitter contest, a submission contest, and I got an editor, my current editor at Rebel Satori Press, the queer space imprint, and he took the novel and my second novel, um, uh, and it's been a good relationship so far. So I think that's pretty much my history through it.
That's incredible. And had you been submitting your previous novels other places as well
Hmm.
before that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I had been through the writers group and through my contact with various writing programs. I had gotten contacts for a lot of agents and editors, and I had been submitting things to them, and they said, "Ah, not just not right for me." And people have very specific wish lists sometimes, so it's hard to hit the right person at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big challenge in finding an agent, finding editors, finding publishers,
Hmm.
and then yeah, once you do find them, or once the agent likes it, it's good to see that you've kind of had every experience almost. Um, it's tough. It's great that those two novels were picked up though. That's incredible. And it's interesting how the editor or the publisher after the editor loved it was like, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. Um, and then yeah, everyone is kind of looking for very specific things. Part of when I was searching for publishers and submitting, it was a lot of, we're not accepting right now. We're too bogged down. Submit and we'll get back to you in 6 months. Email us if you don't get a response. And then you email them and there's no response after that still. So I totally get it. And then throughout the publishing process, did the novel you were mentioning with with an all gay cast, was a lot of that kind of maintained in the finished product?
Well, that part of it was fine. The part that I had to work with a freelance editor on was trying to make the antagonist in the story a little bit easier to comprehend because it was an alien AI, and so they didn't have bodies.
Okay.
So you have like just dialogue and even sort of choppy and repetitive dialogue that trying to make interesting. And I tried several different strategies to make that work, and I ended up just summarizing parts of it so it would sort of ground people in where they were so that the dialogue wouldn't be so jarring.
Okay. That's an interesting little tool too, to kind of if, concepts aren't being read receptively, to kind of go back and not only like look at dialogue, but also maybe like a summary paragraph kind of. That's an interesting device.
Hmm.
I like that. And then with how have how the books how's the reception of the books been? Because
Well,
a big part of, this author's series is to speak to the messages that the work has for the LGBTQ community.
hmm.
Um, have you gotten good reception from the community?
Yeah, I've gotten lots of 5-star reviews for both books, a couple of 4-star reviews. Um, and I've sold probably about 250 of the lever and about 50 or so of the one that came out last year. So they build kind of slowly. I think the odd thing about uh, getting readers to pick up your book is that if you don't have name recognition yet, they're more likely to either take a personal recommendation from somebody they trust. Sometimes
Right.
it's a reviewer, sometimes it's a friend or family member. Um, or it will be so well slotted to their interests that they just have to pick it up. They've been looking for a book like this. It's sort of the same thing. Is it on the reader's wish list?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with an AI villain, it seems
Hmm.
very timely right now. So maybe we can, well, we'll feature this on our site and then we'll put it out there into the socials. Hopefully we can get you some more readers and recognition.
Thank you, Alexander.
Yeah. And now I do want to, have your pitch for your books too, but I want to see if you have any advice in how you navigated your careers around many different corporations, and then you're an out gay writer. Were you as a employee as well?
Hmm.
And how did you kind of navigate that in the professional world?
Being gay in a corporate setting.
Yeah,
You sort of have to navigate it like you would any sort of situation, whether it's work or your uh, place of worship or, your club or your bar friends or whatever. You just sort of, you know, how open are you about sharing parts of yourself? And the person that I sleep with is not necessarily the most important part of me. It doesn't always come up. But when people want to know, do I have an emergency contact? Yes, I do. And they know the gender of the name most often. So that comes up. Or when I hear people talking about their weekend plans, and they ask me what my plans are, sometimes they involve my husband. And so it does come up. But I try not to be ashamed of it. I try not to hide it. I know a lot of people just sort of, get vague when they don't want to reveal too much about their sexuality. Um, but I think it's important to sort of normalize that some people have same-sex partners. And it shouldn't be any different from hetero people sharing about their personal lives.
yeah, definitely. And it seems like you've lived in pretty LGBTQ friendly cities
San
for,
Francisco, LA, and New York, yeah.
yeah. So that, you know, plays a lot into kind of the openness, maybe a little bit the comfort level feeling wise.
Well, I definitely felt that in New York and San Francisco. I think LA, there's still a feeling that when I was there, at least, there was still a very strong feeling that being gay was a liability to your career. So I wouldn't say that was quite as open there. Um,
Yeah, that's something that the liability to careers um, is something that also was kind of while I was in university writing brought to attention. Like, I wrote things very close to me about my
mhm,
experience, gay characters struggling with different things.
mhm.
Um, and I was kind of encouraged to not kind of tackle those things. So I can kind of see, maybe even if they're not individually feeling like it's a liability, it is kind of the sense of the culture around like
Yeah. Well,
with
I was a actor in Hollywood, so that's where it's the strongest. Um, and you have all this, do you know the concept of a beard?
no.
Okay. So a lot of actors up until probably close to the 2000s had what we could call a beard. They would have a woman that they would take to premieres, and that's the beard. They're sort of like somebody to make them look like they're heterosexual, but they're just accompanying them to a public event to make them look like they're straight.
Interesting. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. So I wanted to see if you wanted to talk a little bit about your books individually. Maybe give us a little bit of like a synopsis of it so that, readers can get a little snapshot to check out and maybe pick up.
Sure. If it's okay with you, An- Alexander, I'm wondering if I could sort of combine that with sort of a brief talk about the value and the importance of gay fiction.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think one of the things I've been dealing with some people online on threads in the last few days about this idea of uh, what, how do you define what gay fiction is? Is it just having gay characters that could easily be replaced with straight characters? Um, or is it more deeper than that? And I think as far as categorization for sales purposes, you can certainly just say if it's got gay characters, it's gay fiction. Um, but I think we want to, as authors, to push ourselves a little bit more so that the gay characters are not the single part of the novel or the story that's queer, that you want to have something about the plot or the transition that the characters go through have something to do with the gay experience. And that's not just their sexuality, it's the whole idea of coming out is very unique to queer experience. Um, and the idea of um, uh, not fitting gender um, standards, role models. When you have two men, who does the dishes, that sort of thing. And uh, also, I think with gay people, you also have um, an expectation that you're not going to be producing any offspring. So that can be a part of the equation as well. So just take, for example, I was just thinking this morning, if you had a fantasy novel that was based on a magic system that was sort of a mutation, and you had some people that had the ability to work magic and some that didn't. Um, and when a male and a female get together to produce magical effects. That it's stronger when they're together than when they're independent, but their magic, if they're uh, in mixed sexes, tends to be more balancing, so they can like put out fires or stop floods and things like that to bring things back to balance. But the rare occasion when two men or two women get together, it becomes more of a creative uh, and progressive influence on the magic, and can the rare occasion that two gay magic workers or two lesbian magic workers get together is so rare that it's rarely seen, and it progresses society forward. And that's sort of a metaphor for what gay people function as in our society as well. I think gay people are more willing to take risks. That's another part of the equation, because we're not expected to fulfill particular roles, at least the roles in our traditional industrial society. We had roles back in, indigenous times where we had the two-spirit idea, where that people that didn't procreate were considered to have a closer connection to the Godhead. So I think for my novels, I have the first novel, The Lever, and it's a science fiction thriller. And the army is tr desperate to find new troops because they fear that there's going to be uh, an invasion, but they're not sure. Um, and so it's in a time where young people are so rare because the standard of living has raised, and people are not having as many children, they have to compete against corporations and all sorts of other places that also want young people. And they get a little bit desperate and they try an unethical program to change the um, DNA of people in genetic clinics, patients,
Mm.
to make them more likely to be gay and submissive. And they then kidnap them and abduct them and make them part of their all male or all female platoons. And they think that it's a really satisfying place to be for some reason suddenly. And so the idea there is the gay relationship between one of the male soldiers and another one of the male soldiers gets tested a little bit because the one male soldier, the younger one, has a brain implant, a cybernetic implant, and it gets co-opted by the alien AI, and he gets taken over. And to try to free him, there's this sort of t struggle that goes on near the climax, and it ends up with the character being sort of like a hybrid of the female AI and the male human. So it has sort of a trans sort of element to it as well. And if there had not been that strong relationship, the desire to get him back might not have been as strong. So that's sort of the gay tie-in for that one. From my more recent novel, The Miraculous Life of Rupert Rocket, um, Rupert's bloodline had been cursed by an Irish fairy and to die out. And his grandmother was the one that incurred her wrath because she took a boyfriend back from Irish immigrant who wasn't able to let him go as easily. So she made a deal with this Irish fairy to curse her family. And eventually she meets a fairy's sister, also a fairy, who's able to grant a, a blessing, sort of like in Sleeping Beauty.
Oh,
Um, and so being cursed and blessed, the blessing only lasts for 25 years. And after the 25 years is over, Rupert's grandfather dies suddenly, and their luck gets much worse. So when Rupert is born, uh, his mother and grandmother agree to have Rupert blessed. And the blessing fairy says, well, blessing on your first day in the world can really lead to some chaotic luck. So it will be mostly good, but it'll be a little bit chaotic. And so on every birthday, and his birthday is the same as mine on Christmas morning,
mm,
um, he gets a new blessing. And the blessing usually is something like uh, being able to translate any language or to be virtually invisible because nobody looks for you where you are.
okay.
Things like that. He's got a cornucopia blessing where he can make plants grow a little bit faster and things like that. Um, so the idea is that the um, the cursing fairy thinks, okay, well, this bloodline is dead, done. He's a gay guy. He's the only son of his mother. It's over with. Finally, I'll get my revenge, that sort of thing. And um, the resolution of that one is that he ends up having a family and a son. And the son has some of his blood through a blood transfusion when there was an accident. So that's enough of the preconditions uh, to break the curse.
Yeah.
Say that when he does get married to his boyfriend, that they are a family and it is a real marriage, and that breaks the curse. So he doesn't have any curse or blessing anymore. He's a normal person again. So
Yeah.
that's again the fact that they're gay makes the difference. It leads them into a false sense of security that their bloodline is ending, and knowing that marriage and a loving relationship can actually make a difference in a gay person's life. I think that's the message I wanted to give with that. So I think that the point that I wanted to drill through was that if you make the fact that they're gay part of the plot and essential to its resolution, then it's an even more satisfying a read for people. It can be more engaging, I think, when being gay means something to the plot. That's sort of my point. I think a lot of people will, torture their characters or put them through all sorts of horrible trials. And my editor at first said, well, you got to make sure Rupert dies at the end. I'm like, I don't, after 400 pages of following this character, you want me to kill him? People are going to be so upset. And so I said, no, he has to triumph here. It may be, he's on the edge of death, but he does not die.
Yes. And that's another kind of like the tragic gay man story
Hmm.
is very like prevalent in Hollywood, I've noticed. And
Hmm.
like the kind of I've spoken a little bit about previously, and this ties into the conversation that you've been having on Threads too. So the gay experience being part of the plot, but also the genre that we're writing in, you know.
Hmm.
It seems like a gay sad drama is very catchy in Hollywood for some reason. But every movie that I want to watch with a gay person doesn't have to be that, you know? So,
Hmm.
um, were
You know,
you,
there's a trope called kill your gays.
yeah, I can see that. I, part of why I chose, because as I was figuring out my novel, I was deciding on whether I wanted it to kind of follow like a more literary fiction
Hmm.
plot or if I wanted to embrace the maybe contemporary fantasy genre. And once I kind of decided that, I had to kind of, base the plot around that genre too. So I very much understand your perception, and that's why I ask too, how you in your professional life kind of manage being gay too, because it's still very relevant, and a lot of people are across the country who we know there's a lot of people who are still living closeted, and we know the feeling of that, and the experience of coming out isn't a one-off. It's a
Hmm.
everyday thing. Like
It's
it's
very true.
you have to have the strength and the ability to, if you want to, hold your partner's hand. Like straight couples don't think about these things.
Hmm.
And maybe even having that kind of question in a novel is does some of the work, for us. But
Well, I
so
think the idea of coming out is something that can certainly add to a gay plot line. Yeah.
yeah, and also just the idea of like how gays experience life in a straight society.
Hmm.
Uh, like I've seen on threads too, like people don't want a coming out story every gay book they read, which, you know, is makes sense. However, like coming out is a part of the daily experience of a gay person, so they need to kind of also understand that. And if they're not, they might need a different genre or
Well, I think there's a distinction there to be drawn. I think coming out to oneself may have been overdone in the first gay novels, but there are still plenty of coming outs, as you said, to talk about. You come out to your employer or your boss, you come out to your extended family, and you come out to, the hotel clerk, you come out to the tax auditor and all sorts of stuff. So,
yeah, it's like yeah, we like because it's not the expectation that they would have otherwise.
hmm.
But
Yeah.
very interesting. And then with the genres that you selected, do you kind of read a lot in those genres too? Is that kind of what drove you to maybe a little bit more sci-fi and then a little bit more societal, like army societal?
Yeah, I guess my indoctrination was mostly started through comic books.
Yeah.
And that's sort of speculative to begin with. And then moving from there, superhero type stuff into I had a subscription to Analog magazine when I was 12, and they sent it to me every month. So I was
Yeah.
reading very early Orson Scott Card, who's the Ender's Game author, and
Great.
yeah, well, I read all of his books.
Yeah.
Just
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
not crazy about him as an author, but I do like what he writes.
Yeah.
But the idea of writing science fiction actually came after I moved to New York. I was writing before then, and I was doing like gay thrillers, but I wasn't writing in genre. And now I think I read mostly uh, fantasy and science fiction. So that's also the genres that I mostly uh, follow. I sometimes will add a little bit of horror to my science fiction, but I'm not that much big of a horror fan myself.
Yeah, kind of for suspense and the yeah, the tension elements.
Hmm.
That's awesome. It's been great getting to know you as an author, your works a little bit. Do you have any message for maybe young LGBTQ creatives who are, thinking about the world, what they want to do with their life, and the creative journey that they might be able to undertake?
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of times, as far as your profession or your career, I think if it's not clear to you where you feel the most in flow, like you feel like the work is not really work, that it's just enjoyable for you to do these tasks, that's a good sign. And if you have trouble finding that niche for yourself, I think it's worth it to look back at your childhood to see what sort of things interested you when you were very young. I have a nibbling, a nephew who was always taking things apart when he was like 4 or 5. He'd take apart like the remotes and things like that. And we had to teach him that it was important to put them back together. And he was eventually able to put them back together. But he wanted to see how they worked. And
Yeah.
he didn't know what to do. And I said, well, you've really, when you were young, you really liked mechanical and electronic things. Have you ever thought about becoming an engineer? And he's studying that now. So I think that's
Yeah.
part of what we sometimes have to look back on because we don't have as many expectations and filters when we're young. We just sort of gravitate toward what seems most interesting. And sometimes we forget about that when we go through school and have to, do all these other tasks of geometry and history and psychology and whatever else, mathematics, sciences. Um,
Yeah.
and if we uh, get to the point where we realize that we're gay, you know, we all have to decide how much comfort we have about being open about that. Some people will use a pen name, some
Yeah.
assumed name that they'll uh, publish under, and then they feel freer to be more honest about themselves. But for some people, writing is a coming out process too, and you have to sort of find where you lie. I think one of the really wonderful things about where the queer community has gone now is that we have much more awareness of the different variations on queer identity that are possible. You don't have to decide on a gender. You don't have to decide on a sexuality. You can be bi. You can be, um, what do you call it? Gender fluid.
Yeah.
Um, or you can, choose one of those. You can say how much romance you like. You can be aro or you can be ace, no sex at all. There are all sorts of ways to be queer, and we can sort of identify with those things. We don't feel like it's always going to be a black and white decision. You're either gay or you're straight, you know. Um, and that's really useful. I think also the intersection of race and religion with sexuality is going to be important to acknowledge. And if you have something unique to share there about your Muslim heritage, as far as how it affects your sexuality or your Sikh sexual religion, your Jewish background, your Catholic background, your, conservative background, your um, uh, disabled background, any type of minority that you have um, can be a useful intersection because it opens up a lot of new topics. You
Yeah.
know, how do you, how does your sexuality develop if you're blind? You know, how do you, are you naturally bisexual or do you gravitate toward, the feel and the sound of a particular gender?
Yeah.
That's just different things that come up when you try to combine those intersections of minorities.
Yeah. And this is a big part of the kind of missing puzzle piece of the human experience that a lot of, writers are trying to fill that void of because in a lot of ways it hasn't been explored before. And in, we can think about our own communities and that's easy to do. But like you're saying, it's hard to think about others' communities and kind of the conversations that might need to be have had there. Um, and then so essentially bring your story of humanity into the conversation because that is what we're doing.
Well,
Writing,
I think for a certain point, at a certain point, in your early in your career, you're more likely to draw more heavily on your own experience. My first novel, I, took an actual experience of mine and just sort of played it out differently. Um, and as I got more into writing and publishing, I found that I had the same sort of desire to explore other identities other than my own that I had when I was an actor, trying to portray different characters. So if I
yeah,
portray a really old person or I portray a person who's disabled, I sort of get some insight into what their life experience is like because I have it in mind for a lot of months sometimes.
yeah,
Um, and I think that's really helped me to be more flexible. I wrote a novelette or no novella, sorry, called The Silent Interrogator. And the main character is uh, congenitally disabled. It's in a wheelchair and is blind.
okay,
And I had to always, sort of imagine if your only way to get around was if people carried you or you used your chair, if your only window into the world was smell and sound, uh, that that limits the way you as an author can describe their experience. And so I had to,
yeah,
I'm very visual. And so when I had to say nothing visual, I had to sort
right,
of start to say, oh, well, he heard the sound of the other guy's feet uh, sounding like he was impatient. His feet sounded impatient. You know, he couldn't
yeah,
read the expression on his face, but he could tell from body language that he could hear.
very interesting. That's a interesting exercise too to kind of think about, even for like a short story. If you're,
Hmm.
yeah, that's an idea
Yeah.
to
What would you do
play
if you
around with.
were a penguin? You know,
Yeah,
how would your life be different? Or if you were the opposite gender, how would it be different? That's an important part to remember as well. Um, and what would it be like to be a hermaphrodite? To have elements of both genders. All of those sort of questions can open up new ideas as far as making your narrative more unique and
yeah.
more engaging.
And have you kind of read widely in like LGBTQ um like genres, or do you kind of read mostly just everything?
Um, well, I appreciate gay and lesbian novel, but I'm still trying to get through all of the award-winning novels, and a lot of times they are not.
Yeah.
Um, but Ursula Le Guin, I've read. Um, who else? Don't know who other else I've written in genre. Um,
Right.
I've read several gay literary novels, Bright Lights, Big City, and things like that.
Okay.
and several by David Levitt, who's a gay author, and
Yeah.
started to get into some of the fantasy fiction of Christopher Rice.
Okay. I haven't read many contemporary LGBTQ authors, so that's why I ask too, because uh, what we write might not always be what we read, and sometimes that's not a bad thing too.
No, if you're writing fantasy, I think Christopher Rice is a good person for you to check out. He's publishing now, and he's
Yeah.
very talented.
Yeah, I am gonna
He's
check.
the son of Anne Rice, who wrote the Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, okay, okay. Very nice.
Would you want me to speak any more about the apprenticeship part? What it takes to get there?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, and I like how you put that. So if you could kind of like summarize that for the audience, because that's something I speak about a lot too. Like, I reference what you read, your background a little bit, and then the
Hmm.
professional career, because I think all of that plays into how you become or who you are as a writer.
Hmm.
So yeah, please do.
Okay. So I think mentioned that I wrote about 600,000 words before I published my first stories. And I've heard some other professional writers that have been as much as 1 million words. And what that means is when you finish writing your first novel, that may not be enough. When you write your second or third novel, that might not be enough. And if you want to try and make some money off of them by self-publishing them, that's fine. But it's hard to get other people interested until you've spent the time reading and writing to get to the point where you know how to um, handle dialogue tags. You know when to use them and when not to use them. You know how to express exposition. You don't have info dumps, and you let it out slowly, and you decide which facts you tell when. That you just have characters that are distinctive and not all copies of yourself, that are unique and have their own faults and advantages. That you have enough suspense by sometimes you let the audience or the readers know something that the characters don't know yet. And it gives them a little bit of tension. Sometimes you have to do something totally unexpected in the middle of the book to throw people off from their expectations. Because if people start expecting what's going to happen next, they're going to get bored. So you have to sort of throw that out the window and say, well, what happens here? I started one novel, probably my second novel or so, with expectation that it was going to be good versus bad. Very, very uh, what do you call it?
Like
Eh,
binary.
yeah, binary, right. And by about chapter 5, a small part Korean biochemist on the ship, it was a space opera, uh, said that she wanted more attention. She wanted a bigger part. And so I came up with a backstory for her that she was uh, the daughter of a medical doctor, and sometimes she would sneak in and look in her father's medical bag, and she would start to see what the different drugs were, and she started stealing hypnotics. Um,
Oh,
and she would start inviting boys over, giving them the hypnotic, and then convincing them to have sex with her.
oh my gosh.
So she was a sort of a rapist in a way.
Yeah.
And so, uh, but she ends up being important in um, the resolution of the plot because all of the soldiers on the ship that she has uh, under her control um, end up being the way that she thwarts the mutiny. So I have a
Okay.
black character, evil colonel, very establishment type of white character, the good captain, and then now I have this gray character in the middle that's sort of morally ambiguous. You know, she does some things that are really not very nice, and other things she does for very good reasons, and you sort of wonder, should I be rooting for her or not?
Yeah, like the wondering. Yes, I get that.
So
Those are
all of that is part of what gets you to be a better writer. You know, you start to recognize what are the tricks that you need to learn in order to be a better writer, to be able to um, make sure that you hold people's attention without withholding too much information and frustrating them, but not so much that they start to expect that they're being spoon-fed and that everything's becoming really easy to predict. You have to sort of find that balance and also to try and give an overall arc. You know, you have an arc to a scene, but you also have an overall arc. Are we learning enough about where the resolution is going? Are you dropping enough hints about it? Are you making it seem like it's the only way to resolve the story, you know, by cutting off all the other possibilities in the course of the rest of the story? So all of those are things that you learn only by doing a lot of reading, seeing how other people do it, and by writing. So you get a chance to figure out how to work it out when you're actually putting words on the page. And, you know, sometimes it's something as simple as, you know, putting an interesting chapter title uh, on your manuscript, you know, or giving it the novel an interesting title. You know, sometimes it's that small, or that you
yeah,
have a prologue or a foreword or something that sort of sets the scene really well. That you develop a language for your other race, you know, that adds some fascination for the reader, or that you have different customs from a different culture that your characters have to deal with, you know. Always presenting something new and challenging to your readers is part of the process too. So think that's the main thing is I think I see too many people feeling like their first novel is going to be a hit and maybe put it away and look at it later to see if you can revise it to be better. But
yeah,
uh, don't expect a lot out of your first or second novel. I mean, maybe by your third or fourth, you have something that's you've learned enough that where you're able to get other people interested in it. That's always a good marker. You know, just say that you're working on writing a novel and you're not sure what you're going to do with it. You may want to submit it around just to check, but you know, often, unless authors are really well read and have done some other writing somewhere else, they're probably not going to do very well on their first novel. So it's worth it to keep working on it and, you know, test it in the marketplace if you want to. You know, see how many you can sell if your first novel, but uh, don't have high expectations. A lot of authors only reach their stride after their third or fourth novel.
yeah. And so yeah, so authors writing their first novel, maybe, um, you know, get rid of the fear, because even, the holding on to that fear of doing what you want to do with the novel might be the thing that, he holds you back from just growing as a writer.
Hmm.
Because if you're kind of writing to fit a mold or writing to fit a audience expectation or genre,
Hmm.
especially, first time writing, if you have, well, never written anything before, I would recommend like start with a short story, like kind of master the storytelling aspect of a novel.
Definitely. Start even smaller. Start with
Yeah.
flash fiction. You know, do a
Yeah.
thousand words. Just write a scene.
Yeah. Very valuable because that's the fundamentals of creating a chapter, a
And the other
short
thing
story.
you can do that's really valuable is write to a prompt. You know,
Yeah.
there's different places where you can come up with prompts or that you can come up with them on your own. And that's a great exercise in opening up your mind. You know, how do you deal with the prompt of uh, nobody ever seems to come in and out of that green door on that side street. You know,
Yeah.
where does that lead you? You know, what problems do you see? What questions do you need answered from that scenario? You know, or which is more important for your overall life, your freedom or your feeling of love, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, really, really good stuff and fun stuff when you're sitting down figuring it out too.
Hmm.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us, Mark, and reaching
Hmm.
out. I think we could definitely benefit from probably another hour with you, but we'll save that for when you have something else coming up for
I
us to.
have other things coming up. I have
Yeah.
4 books that are on submission right now. I have a
Oh,
time travel novel. I have a, a gay thriller. I have another magical realism novel. I have a collection of robot short stories. So a lot of stuff
yeah.
coming.
Yeah. And maybe even we could do, if you would be comfortable, we could do part of a reading for the audience here.
Sure,
Um,
that's a good idea.
yeah, for one of your previous novels or one of the upcomings once it's getting out there.
Yeah.
And
Thank you very much, Alexander.
yeah, we'll partner this video with the article on Four Elements Press website. We'll share it around on the socials. It'll be on YouTube. So feel free to share it out.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And then I don't know what day we're gonna launch it, but I'll keep you posted.
That's great.
And much great things to come, I think. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
great. Thank you so much.
Take care, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much for watching the third installment of the Four Elements Press LGBTQ Authors series. As usual, the article is posted below. You can find Mark's information there and through our LGBTQ author directory. And be on the lookout for upcoming videos. We'll be doing some readings with some of the authors we've been talking to of their works and about their upcoming plans. Thank you so much for following Four Elements Press on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Take care.